That night, a poor single mother ran into the emergency room with her 5-year-old son dying in her arms. She had no insurance, no savings, and no one to call. But within seconds, the entire hospital froze for one man. A powerful millionaire stepped forward, took the child from her arms, and gave orders like everyone's life depended on him. What the mother didn't know was that this man wasn't just a stranger. He was the father of her children, and he had no idea they even existed. If stories about love, sacrifice, and the strength of family touch your heart, please subscribe and join this journey with me. Vivian Carter pushed through the glass doors of Chicago Mercy Hospital, her breath coming in broken gasps. "My son can't breathe. Please, someone help." The fluorescent lights blurred above her as panic tightened around her chest. In her arms, little Noah lay limp, his small body frighteningly still, his lips pale. Beside her, his twin brother Liam clung to her leg, crying so hard he could barely speak. "Mom, is Noah going to die?" Vivian couldn't answer. Her throat felt locked. Fear had taken over every part of her. She was a nurse. She knew the signs. She knew how dangerous this was. And she also knew something else. She didn't have the money for a private hospital. She didn't even know how she was going to pay the emergency bill. But none of that mattered right now. All that mattered was keeping her son alive. Nurses rushed forward with a stretcher, but before they could reach her, the double doors leading to the hospital's VIP wing burst open. A man stepped out. He wasn't wearing a doctor's coat. He wore a black suit, perfectly tailored, his posture straight, his presence commanding. His gray eyes swept the room, sharp and cold. Something strange happened. Doctors moved aside. Nurses stepped back. Even the security guard straightened. People didn't question him. They obeyed him. The man walked straight toward Vivian, his voice calm but firm. "Give him to me. Now." Vivian froze. That voice. Something about it pulled at a memory she had buried deep inside her heart. But she didn't have time to think. Noah's chest barely moved. With shaking hands, she let the stranger take her child. The man turned instantly. "Emergency room 3. Oxygen. Now." His tone left no room for delay. Within seconds, a full team surrounded Noah and rushed him through the doors. The double doors slammed shut. And just like that, her son was gone. Liam clung tighter to her leg. "Mom, who was that man?" Everyone looked scared of him. Vivian stared at the closed doors, her heart pounding like a drum. Because deep down, she already knew the answer. 5 years ago, on a rainy night, she had met a man with those same gray eyes. Back then, she was running for her life. Running from a violent husband. Running from a home that had become a prison. She had collapsed outside a luxury hotel, soaked, bruised, barely conscious. A black Rolls-Royce had pulled up. A tall stranger stepped out. He didn't ask questions. He didn't turn away like everyone else. He carried her inside. That night changed everything. And the next morning, he was gone. On the table beside the bed sat $50,000 and a short note. "Disappear. Don't come back." Vivian had done exactly that. She divorced her husband. Moved to a poor neighborhood. Started over with nothing. 2 months later, she learned she was pregnant. Twins. And now, 5 years later, the man she had never forgotten had just carried her son into surgery. Liam looked up at her again, his small face streaked with tears. "Mom, that man looks like me. He has eyes like mine." Vivian's heart clenched. She wrapped her arms around him and pulled him close. 2 hours passed. The waiting room felt cold and endless. The sound of machines echoed from behind the walls. Every second felt like a year. Vivian sat there, holding Liam tightly, whispering prayers she hadn't said in years. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't asking for comfort. She was asking for one thing. Please, let my son live. Finally, the emergency doors opened. The man stepped out. His suit was stained with blood. His hair was slightly messy now, but his expression remained controlled. His eyes scanned the room. Then they stopped. On Liam. The child stared back at him. Same gray eyes. Same dark hair. Same shape of face. The man didn't move. For the first time, the powerful, untouchable businessman looked shaken. Vivian slowly stood up, her legs weak. How is my son?" she asked. The man's voice was quieter now. "He's alive." Vivian collapsed into tears, her knees hitting the floor. Liam held on to her as she cried, years of exhaustion and fear pouring out all at once. But the man wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Liam, studying him, as if trying to understand something impossible. Then his eyes shifted back to Vivian, and this time recognition flickered across his face. 5 years ago, he said slowly. The Peninsula Hotel. The girl in the rain. Vivian's breath stopped. She nodded. The silence between them grew heavy. The man swallowed once. Then he asked the question she had feared for 5 years. How old are they? Vivian closed her eyes. 5. The color drained from his face. Because in that moment, the powerful millionaire of Chicago realized something that would change all their lives forever. He wasn't just looking at a patient's family. He was looking at his children. And the past he had walked away from had just come back to claim him. And Vivian didn't know which was more dangerous. The powerful man who didn't know he had a family, or the one who had just realized he did. Cade didn't speak for a long moment. He stood there, tall and still, like a man trying to hold himself together while something inside him was quietly breaking apart. 5 years. 2 children. 5 years of first steps, first words, birthdays, fevers, laughter, and tears. And he had missed all of it. His gray eyes moved from Liam back to Vivian. There was no anger in them. No accusation. Only one question. Why didn't you tell me? The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of everything he hadn't known. Vivian wiped her face slowly, steadying her breathing. For a second, she looked at him the way a tired woman looks at a long road she had walked alone. Tell you? She repeated softly. Then something inside her snapped. How was I supposed to tell you? Her voice wasn't loud, but it trembled with 5 years of buried pain. You disappeared. You left money and a note telling me to vanish. No name. No number. Nothing. Just disappear. Cade's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. Vivian went on, her words coming faster now, the truth she had swallowed for years finally finding its way out. When I found out I was pregnant, I went back to that hotel. I asked about you. They told me the room was booked under a corporate account. No information. No records. She swallowed, her eyes shining again. I called them 27 times. 27. Begging them to check again. The waiting area was silent. Even the nurses at the desk had slowed their movements, sensing the weight of the moment. They told me the same thing every time, she said. That the guest didn't exist. Cade's hands slowly curled into fists at his sides. I didn't hide the boys from you, Vivian continued, her voice breaking. I couldn't find you. You were a ghost. For the first time since he had walked out of the emergency room, the powerful businessman looked lost. He leaned back against the wall, exhaling slowly, like the air had suddenly become heavy. I gave birth alone, Vivian said, quieter now. They were premature. They were in intensive care for 2 weeks. Her eyes dropped to the floor. I signed every paper alone. Paid every bill alone. Took them home alone. Liam held onto her hand tighter, sensing the emotion even if he didn't understand the words. There were nights I didn't sleep for 3 days, she whispered. I worked double shifts just to afford formula. I ate whatever they left on their plates. Cade closed his eyes. Each sentence felt like a blow. While she had been fighting to survive, he had been living in a penthouse, making deals worth millions, surrounded by people who called him powerful. 5 years. And he hadn't known. Silence settled between them. Finally, he spoke. I should have looked for you. His voice was low, rough, nothing like the commanding tone everyone in the hospital feared. I should have never let you walk away that night. Vivian looked at him. There was no triumph in her eyes. No satisfaction. Only exhaustion. I wasn't someone you were meant to look for, she said gently. I was just a girl you helped once. Cade's eyes opened slowly. You're the mother of my children, he said. The words landed between them like something heavy and real. Before either of them could say anything else, a nurse approached. Mr. Thornton, the child is stable, but he'll need to stay for observation. Vivian blinked. Thornton. The name hit her harder than anything else. Liam looked up at her. Mom, is that his name? She didn't answer. Because now she understood something she hadn't before. The man standing in front of her wasn't just wealthy. He was one of the most powerful men in Chicago. And somehow, he was their father. Cade turned back to Vivian. You should stay with Noah, he said quietly. She hesitated. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes that wasn't control or authority. Guilt. Then he added softer, he needs you. Vivian nodded and took Liam's hand. As she walked toward the patient rooms, she felt Cade's gaze follow them. Inside the recovery room, Noah lay on the bed, small and pale, an oxygen tube resting beneath his nose. His chest rose and fell slowly, but steadily. Vivian sat beside him and brushed the hair from his forehead. Mom, Noah whispered weakly. She smiled through tears. I'm here, baby. Liam climbed onto the chair beside the bed, holding his brother's hand. From the doorway, Cade stood watching. He didn't step inside. He didn't speak. He just watched the three of them together. The way Vivian leaned close, whispering comfort. The way Liam refused to let go of his brother. The way Noah relaxed the moment he heard his mother's voice. It was quiet. Simple. Nothing expensive. Nothing impressive. But it was something Cade had never had. A family. He stayed there longer than he meant to. Then, without making a sound, he stepped back into the hallway. His assistant, Finn, was already waiting. Boss? Finn asked carefully. Cade's voice came out calm again, but there was something different underneath it. Find out everything about Vivian Carter, he said. Finn nodded. Everything. Cade looked back once toward the room where his children lay. Everything, he repeated. Because for the first time in his life, the most powerful man in Chicago wasn't thinking about business. He was thinking about the life his children had been living without him. And deep down, he had a feeling he wasn't ready for what he was about to find. That night, long after the hospital quieted and the hallways emptied, Cade sat alone in his office at the top floor of his downtown building. The lights of Chicago stretched below him, cold and distant, but he wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at the file Finn had just placed on his desk. Vivian Carter. Age, 27. Occupation, registered nurse. Annual income, modest. Address, South Side. Cade's eyes moved slowly down the page. Rent, utilities, child care, groceries, medical payments. He stopped at one number. Average monthly balance after expenses, $48. For a long moment, he didn't move. $48. That was what she had left each month, raising 2 children alone. His jaw tightened. He turned the page. Student loan debt. Medical debt from the twins' premature birth. Credit card balances. A payment plan for Noah's previous hospital visit. Every line told the same story. She wasn't living. She was surviving. Finn stood quietly across the desk, watching his boss's expression change. She works double shifts most weeks, Finn said carefully. Sometimes nights too. Daycare covers the hours she can't be home. Cade didn't respond. He was staring at a small photo clipped to the file. Vivian, standing outside a run-down apartment building. Liam on one side. Noah on the other. Both boys smiling, holding her hands. The building behind them had peeling paint. Rusted railings. Cracked windows. Cade closed the file slowly. "My sons live there?" he asked. Finn nodded. Silence filled the room. Then Cade stood, grabbed his coat, and walked toward the door. "Where are you going, boss?" Finn asked. Cade didn't stop. "To see how my family is living." The south side looked different at night. Streetlights flickered. Sirens echoed in the distance. Small groups of men lingered near corners, their eyes following the black luxury car as it pulled up in front of an aging brick building. The Rolls-Royce didn't belong here. Cade stepped out. The air smelled damp. The stairwell inside was narrow and dim, the walls stained with years of neglect. Each step creaked under his weight as he climbed to the 3rd floor. Apartment 3B. He stood there for a second before trying the handle. The cheap lock gave way easily. Inside, the space was smaller than his office. A single room served as both living area and bedroom. A tiny kitchen sat in one corner. The ceiling showed dark patches of moisture. Cade stepped inside slowly. The boy's mattress lay on the floor, covered with clean but worn blankets. A small table held crayons, coloring books, and a few carefully repaired toys. Everything was old, but everything was clean. He opened the refrigerator. Milk, eggs, bread, a few vegetables, a small pack of chicken. No snacks, no juice boxes, nothing extra, just the basics. The kind of groceries someone bought when every dollar mattered. He closed the fridge and moved toward a small closet. 5 nurse uniforms hung neatly together. 2 pairs of jeans. A few simple shirts. Nothing expensive. Nothing unnecessary. Nothing for herself. Every part of the apartment told the same story. She had given everything she had to her children, and kept nothing for herself. Cade turned toward the wall. That was when he saw the drawing. A child's crayon picture taped carefully beside the mattress. 4 figures holding hands. A woman with brown hair. 2 small boys. And a tall man. But the man didn't have a face. Just a dark outline. Below the drawing, written in uneven letters. My family. Mom, Noah, Liam, and Dad somewhere. Cade stood there without moving. For the first time in years, something tight and painful pressed against his chest. His son had drawn him. Not as a person. As an absence. A shadow. A question mark. He turned away slowly, his eyes landing on another paper lying on the table. A hospital bill. $8,742. Cade stared at the number. That was nearly 4 months of her income. He picked up his phone. Finn. Yes, boss. Prepare the Gold Coast penthouse. There was a pause. For you, sir. For my children, Cade said. His voice had turned cold again, controlled. 3 bedrooms. Toys. Books. Clothes. Everything they need. Another pause. And Vivian? Finn asked. Cade looked around the apartment one last time. At the cracked walls. At the thin mattress. At the drawing of the faceless father. "They're all moving in," he said. That same night, back at the hospital, Vivian sat beside Noah's bed while Liam slept curled against her shoulder. The room was quiet except for the soft rhythm of the monitor. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Cade's face. The shock in his eyes. The way he had looked at the boys. The way he had said, "My children." It scared her. Not because he was dangerous, but because he was powerful. Power meant control. And control meant one thing. He could take them. The door opened quietly. Vivian looked up. Cade stepped inside. He had changed his shirt, but his expression was still serious. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he walked closer and stopped beside the bed, looking down at Noah. "He'll recover," Cade said softly. Vivian nodded. "Thank you for earlier." Cade didn't respond to the thanks. Instead, he looked at Liam sleeping against her shoulder. Then at Noah. Then back at her. "You and the boys are moving in with me," he said. The words were calm. Simple. Final. Vivian blinked, certain she had heard him wrong. "What?" "My penthouse," Cade continued. "It's safer. Cleaner. You won't have to worry about bills. Or medical costs." Vivian slowly stood, careful not to wake Liam. "No," she said. Cade frowned slightly. "You're living in a building with broken locks and mold on the ceiling," he said. "My children are not staying there." "They're my children," Vivian answered. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. "I've raised them for 5 years without you. We're not moving anywhere." For a long moment, they stood facing each other. Rich and poor. Power and survival. Two worlds that didn't trust each other. Cade's eyes studied her carefully. "You're drowning in debt," he said quietly. "How long do you think you can keep this up?" Vivian's hands tightened at her sides. "I don't need your money," she said. Cade reached into his pocket and placed a black card on the table beside Noah's bed. No name. No title. Just a phone number. "When you need help," he said, "call." He turned toward the door. But before leaving, he paused. And without looking back, he added quietly, "You're stronger than anyone I've ever met." The door closed behind him. Vivian stood there, staring at the card. She told herself she would never use it. That she didn't need him. That she could keep doing this alone. But 3 days later, in the middle of the night, she would be dialing that number with shaking hands. 3 nights later, the small apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the old refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside. Vivian had just finished a double shift. Her feet ached. Her back burned. But the boys were asleep, and that was enough to keep her moving. She checked their blankets, brushed Liam's hair back from his forehead, and leaned down to kiss Noah gently. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe. Maybe things were going to be okay. Then she heard it. A strange sound. A thin, harsh noise. Like someone trying to pull air through a blocked straw. Vivian's body went still. The sound came again. She turned quickly. Liam was sitting up. Both hands were clutching his throat. His eyes were wide with fear. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely there. "I can't breathe." Every ounce of exhaustion vanished. Vivian rushed to him, pulling him into her arms. His skin felt hot. His breathing came in tight, wheezing pulls. Not as severe as Noah's attack. But close. Too close. She checked his pulse, his temperature, his airway. Her nurse's training moved automatically. But behind the calm movements, panic was rising. He needed a hospital. No. Her eyes moved toward the door, then toward the table, toward the envelope where she had placed the black card. She froze. No. She could take him to the public hospital. But she knew what that meant. A crowded waiting room. Hours before being seen. Another bill she couldn't pay. Another night gambling with her child's life. Liam wheezed again, his small body trembling. That was enough. Pride didn't matter. Fear didn't matter. Vivian grabbed the card. Her fingers shook as she dialed. The phone rang once. Twice. Then Cade's voice came through, clear and awake. Vivian. No surprise. No irritation. As if he had been expecting her call. Liam, she said, her voice breaking. He can't breathe. There was a brief silence. Then his tone changed instantly. Sharp. Focused. Address. She gave it. Don't move, he said. I'm coming. The line disconnected. 12 minutes later, headlights flooded the street outside. Vivian carried Liam down the stairs, Noah running behind her in his pajamas. A black car waited at the curb. Cade was already out of the driver's seat, the back door open. He didn't waste time asking questions. He took Liam carefully from her arms, supporting the boy's back and neck as if he had done it 100 times. Get in, he said. The car pulled away before the door fully closed. They didn't head toward the public hospital. They drove across the city, past the familiar neighborhoods, into an area where the buildings grew taller, the streets cleaner, the lights brighter. The car stopped in front of a private medical center. The sign outside read, Thornton Medical. Vivian felt her stomach tighten. Inside, everything moved fast. Too fast. Doctors were already waiting. Liam was taken immediately into a treatment room. No paperwork. No waiting. No questions about insurance. Vivian stood in the hallway holding Noah's hand, trying to steady her breathing. Across from her, Cade spoke quietly with a physician, his expression tight, controlled. For the first time, she saw something behind his calm. Fear. 2 hours passed. Finally, the doctor approached them. He's stable, the man said. But we need to run further tests. Both boys. Vivian frowned. Both. The doctor nodded carefully. We need to speak privately. They stepped into a consultation room. The doctor sat down, folding his hands. Your sons are showing signs of a genetic condition, he said gently. It causes growths in the airway. They'll need regular monitoring, possibly surgery over time. Vivian felt the air leave her lungs. For how long? She asked. The doctor hesitated. For life. Silence filled the room. Then he added quietly, This condition is inherited from the father's side. Vivian didn't look at Cade. She didn't have to. The stillness beside her told her everything. When the meeting ended, Cade walked out without a word. Vivian stayed behind for a moment, trying to absorb the information, the treatment plan, the long-term care schedule. When she finally stepped into the hallway, she didn't see him. Noah had fallen asleep in the chair. She covered him with her coat, then walked slowly down the corridor. Something pulled her toward the far end. She found Cade there, sitting on the floor, back against the wall, his hands covering his face. His shoulders were shaking. Vivian stopped. This was the man who controlled businesses, hospitals, and half the city. The man people feared. And he was breaking. I gave this to them, he said hoarsely, not looking up. They're sick because of me. Vivian hesitated. Then she walked over and sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. You didn't know, she said softly. That doesn't change anything, he whispered. His hands lowered slowly. His eyes were red. I missed their lives, he said. And now they'll spend the rest of it dealing with something I gave them." Vivian looked at him. For the first time, she didn't see a powerful man. She saw a father. A man who was grieving something he couldn't fix with money or influence. "They're alive," she said gently. "They're strong. And now they won't go through it alone." Cade turned his head toward her. Their eyes met. Something shifted between them. Not distance. Not tension. Understanding. He didn't say thank you. He didn't speak at all. But he didn't move away either. They sat there in silence. Two people from completely different worlds, joined by the same fear, the same responsibility, and for the first time, the same family. Down the hall, a nurse called Vivian's name. She stood slowly. Cade rose with her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he said quietly, "Come home with me." This time, it didn't sound like an order. It sounded like a request. Vivian looked at him, then toward the room where her sons were sleeping. And for the first time since that night began, she hesitated. Vivian didn't answer right away. She stood there, her arms folded lightly around herself, her mind moving through everything that had happened in the last few days. 5 years of doing everything alone. 5 years of learning not to depend on anyone. And now this man, powerful, wealthy, dangerous in ways she didn't fully understand, was asking her to trust him. Not for herself. For the boys. Cade didn't push her. He didn't step closer. He simply waited, his gray eyes steady, giving her the space to decide. "I need to think," she said finally. He nodded once. "That's fair." There was no frustration in his voice. No pressure. Just quiet acceptance. When they returned to the room, Liam was awake again, sitting up in the bed with Noah beside him. The boys looked tired, but calmer now, their breathing steady. Liam looked at Cade with curiosity. "Are you the doctor?" he asked. Cade shook his head slightly. "No." "Then who are you?" The question hung in the air. Vivian felt her heart tighten. She wasn't ready for that conversation. Not yet. Cade seemed to understand. "I'm someone who's going to make sure you and your brother stay healthy," he said gently. Liam studied him for a moment, then nodded as if that answer was good enough. "Okay," he said simply. Children didn't need explanations the way adults did. They just needed to feel safe. For the next 3 days, Liam stayed under observation. And during those 3 days, something began to change. The first night, Vivian woke around 2 in the morning to a faint glow near the hospital bed. Cade was sitting there. He wasn't working. He wasn't on his phone. He was reading a book. She blinked, trying to focus on the title. How to Care for Children with Chronic Illness. He turned the pages slowly, his brow slightly furrowed, like a man studying something that mattered more than any business deal. Every few minutes, he would glance up at Liam, checking his breathing before returning to the book. Vivian pretended to sleep. But she watched. The second night, she woke again. This time, Cade wasn't reading. He was sitting beside the bed with one hand resting lightly on Liam's blanket, feeling the rise and fall of the boy's chest. He hadn't slept. He hadn't left. He just sat there, quiet and alert, like a guard who refused to take his eyes off what mattered. On the third night, Noah woke from a bad dream. Before Vivian could even sit up, Cade was already there. "What's wrong?" he asked softly. "I saw monsters," Noah whispered. Cade hesitated for a second, clearly unsure what to do. Then he pulled a chair closer. "Want me to tell you a story?" Noah nodded. Cade cleared his throat awkwardly, then began telling a simple story about a brave little lion who protected his brother from the dark. His voice wasn't smooth. He stumbled over parts. But Noah listened. And within minutes, he fell asleep again. Vivian lay there in the dim light, staring at the ceiling. For years, she had told herself her children didn't need a father, that she could be enough. But watching this man, this powerful, complicated man, sit through the night just to make sure her sons kept breathing, she felt something inside her shift. The boys needed him. On the morning Liam was discharged, the doctor finished explaining the long-term treatment plan. Regular checkups, possible procedures, close monitoring. Vivian listened carefully, committing every detail to memory. When the paperwork was finished, she turned toward Cade. He was waiting quietly, giving her space. She took a slow breath. "We'll move in," she said. For the first time since she had known him, surprise flashed across his face. "You're sure?" he asked. "No," she admitted honestly. "But the boys need stability. They need care I can't give them alone anymore." She stepped a little closer, her voice firm. "But there are conditions." Cade nodded immediately. "Tell me." "I'm not your employee," she said. "I'm not your responsibility. I'm their mother. I make decisions for them." "Agreed. I keep my job. I worked hard to build that life. I'm not giving it up." "Agreed. And you don't control me. I'm there for the boys. Not for you." Cade studied her for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "I accept all of that." She wasn't expecting him to agree so easily. But then he added, "I have one condition too." Vivian lifted her chin. "What?" "You let me protect you." His voice was calm, but there was something urgent underneath it. "My world isn't safe," he continued. "There are people who would hurt you just to get to me. If you're with me, I need to know you won't shut me out when things get dangerous." Vivian held his gaze. For the first time, she didn't see power. She saw worry. Real worry. "For the boys," she said slowly, "I'll accept that." Cade exhaled quietly, like he had been holding his breath. That afternoon, they left the hospital together. When the car stopped in front of the Gold Coast building, Noah pressed his face against the window. "Mom, is this a hotel?" Vivian almost smiled. Inside, the penthouse was bright and wide, filled with sunlight and space. The boys' new room had 2 beds, shelves full of books, and more toys than they had ever owned. But what surprised Vivian most wasn't the luxury. It was Cade. He sat on the floor with the boys, trying to help Noah build a complicated Lego set. After several minutes, Noah laughed. "Dad, that piece doesn't go there." The word slipped out naturally. "Dad." Cade froze for a second. Then, slowly, he handed the piece back. "Show me how," he said. Vivian stood in the doorway, watching them. This was the life she had never allowed herself to imagine. A father. A home. Safety. But even as warmth touched her chest, something inside her remained guarded. Because life had taught her one thing. When something felt too good, it usually didn't last. And somewhere out there, in the shadows of the city, a part of her past was already beginning to move back toward her. For the first few days, the penthouse didn't feel like home to Vivian. It felt like a place she was borrowing. The space was too large, too quiet, too perfect. Every surface shined. Every room smelled clean. Every window looked out over a city she had spent years struggling just to survive in. She moved carefully, almost afraid to touch things. But the boys adjusted faster. Children always did. Noah ran from room to room, discovering books, puzzles, and shelves full of toys he had only seen in store windows before. Liam stayed closer to Vivian at first, holding her hand as he walked through the wide living area. "Mom," he whispered, looking up at the high ceiling. "Do we live here now?" Vivian knelt beside him. "For a while," she said softly. He thought about that, then nodded. Okay. That evening, she came downstairs to find Cade sitting cross-legged on the floor again. This time, he was coloring. Liam sat beside him, carefully guiding his hand. You have to stay inside the lines, Liam said seriously. Cade frowned slightly, concentrating harder than he probably ever had in a boardroom. I am staying inside the lines, he said. You're not, Noah announced from across the table. That dinosaur is blue and purple and kind of messy. Cade studied the page. Then he looked at Liam. Fix it for me. Liam smiled and took the pencil, correcting the edges like a small teacher. Vivian stood there longer than she meant to. The man who ran half the city was letting a 5-year-old tell him what to do. And he didn't look annoyed. He looked grateful. That night, dinner was prepared by a private chef. But when Cade came into the dining room, he found Vivian sitting with the boys at the smaller table in the kitchen instead. She was feeding Liam soup, blowing on each spoonful before handing it to him. Cade leaned against the doorway. There's a full dinner set up in the dining room, he said. Vivian didn't look up. I eat with them, she replied. You can bring them there. They're comfortable here. There was no argument in her voice. Just distance. Cade watched for a moment, then nodded once and walked away without pushing. That became their routine. Vivian kept her job. She left early every morning in her simple nurse uniform, refusing the car service Cade offered and driving her old Toyota instead. She paid for small things herself. Groceries for the boys' favorite snacks. Their school supplies. Even their clothes when she could. She didn't want to feel owned. And Cade didn't interfere. But he watched. He noticed the way she avoided sitting at the same table with him. The way she kept conversations short. The way she locked her bedroom door at night. She was here for the boys. Not for him. One evening, about a week after they moved in, Vivian came home late from a long shift. As she passed the boys' room, she heard voices inside. She paused quietly at the doorway. Noah was sitting on the bed, looking up at Cade. Dad, he asked, his voice small, why weren't you with us before? The question hung in the air. Vivian held her breath. She expected excuses. Or silence. But Cade sat down slowly beside Noah. Because I didn't know you existed, he said. Noah blinked. That's your fault? The boy asked. Cade nodded. I wasn't there when your mom needed me. I wasn't there when you were born. I wasn't there while you grew up. His voice was steady, but softer than Vivian had ever heard it. And I'm sorry. There was a long pause. Then Noah climbed into his lap. It's okay, he said simply. You're here now. Cade didn't speak, but his arms wrapped around the boy tightly, his face lowering into Noah's hair. From the doorway, Vivian turned away quietly. Her eyes burned. She had spent years building walls around her heart. Walls made from exhaustion, from disappointment, from fear of trusting someone who might disappear again. And now those walls were beginning to crack. But life rarely allowed peace to settle for long. 2 weeks later, Vivian finished a late shift at the hospital. The parking lot was nearly empty. The night air was cold as she walked toward her car, her keys already in her hand. Then a voice came from the darkness behind her. Long time, Viv. Her body froze. Slowly, she turned. A man stepped out from between two parked cars. Older, cleaner, sober. But the face was the same. The same eyes. The same smile that had once made her stomach tighten with fear. Derek. Her ex-husband. Her heart slammed hard against her ribs. We're divorced, she said quickly, her voice tight. You need to stay away from me. Derek laughed softly. Divorced, he said. You really think a piece of paper changes anything? He stepped closer. Vivian backed into her car door. I've been looking for you, he continued. 5 years. And then I see you walking into that fancy building on the Gold Coast. He pulled out his phone. On the screen was a photo. Vivian walking into the penthouse entrance. The boys beside her. And look at that, Derek said. You didn't just get yourself a rich life. You got yourself a rich man. Vivian's hands shook. What do you want? $200,000, he said simply. Her breath caught. I don't have that. Derek smiled wider. Then you better ask your millionaire boyfriend. Vivian shook her head. He's not. Derek cut her off. You've got 1 week, he said. If you don't pay, I start talking. I know people who would love to hear about Cade Thornton's little family. Vivian felt the blood drain from her face. Don't tell him, Derek added quietly. If he finds out you came to him for help, I'll make sure the wrong people learn where your kids sleep. Then he stepped back into the shadows. And disappeared. Vivian stood there alone in the parking lot, her hands trembling, her heart racing. For the first time since moving into the penthouse, she felt truly afraid. And when she walked through the front door that night, Cade looked up from the living room. You're pale, he said immediately. What happened? Vivian forced a small smile. Nothing, she said. Just a long shift. She walked past him toward her room. But as she closed the door behind her and leaned against it, the tears finally came. Because the past she had run from for 5 years had just found her again. Vivian didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her bed, her hands wrapped around her phone, staring at the dark screen as if it might tell her what to do. For 5 years, she had protected her children by staying invisible. Now someone knew where they lived. And he wasn't afraid to use them. She thought about telling Cade. She thought about walking out to the living room, sitting down across from him, and saying the words. But Derek's warning echoed in her mind. If he finds out you came to him, I'll make sure the wrong people know where your kids sleep. Fear for herself didn't matter. Fear for her children did. The next morning, she moved through the house like everything was normal. Breakfast, backpacks, hugs before preschool. Cade watched her quietly. You're not eating, he said. I'm fine, she replied. You didn't sleep. Just tired. He studied her for a moment, his eyes sharp, reading more than her words. But he didn't push. He had learned something about Vivian. If she felt cornered, she would shut down. So he waited. That afternoon, while Vivian was at work, Cade sat in his office reviewing security reports from the building. A short video clip caught his attention. The hospital parking lot. Vivian standing near her car. A man stepping out of the shadows. The way she backed up. The way her shoulders tightened. The way she looked afraid. Cade replayed the footage 3 times. Then he called Finn. Find him, he said quietly. That evening, when Vivian came home, Cade was waiting for her. He didn't ask questions. He didn't accuse. He simply held out a tablet. On the screen was the footage. Vivian's heart stopped. You were going to handle this alone? Cade asked. She swallowed hard. He threatened the boys, she whispered. If I told you, he said he'd. You don't fight alone anymore, Cade said gently. Her eyes filled. I didn't want to make things worse. Cade stepped closer. You don't make things worse by trusting me. That was the moment something inside her finally gave way. All the years of carrying everything alone. All the fear. All the strength she had forced herself to hold. She broke. I'm tired, she whispered. I'm so tired of being scared all the time. Cade pulled her into his arms. "You're safe now," he said quietly. "And so are the boys." The next day, Derek was taken into custody. No drama. No threats. Just quiet, final justice. The evidence against him wasn't small. Blackmail. Extortion. Harassment. The man who had once controlled her life was now sitting in a cell, powerless. For the first time in years, Vivian felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel. Peace. That night, the four of them sat together in the living room. Noah leaned against Cade's side, showing him a drawing. Liam sat on the floor, building something complicated out of blocks. Vivian watched them from the couch. This was the picture she had never believed she would have. Not a perfect life, but a safe one. A real one. Later, after the boys were asleep, she stepped onto the balcony. The city lights stretched out below, quiet and steady. Cade joined her, standing beside her without speaking. After a moment, he said, "You don't have to be strong all the time anymore." Vivian looked at him. For 5 years, being strong was the only way we survived. "And now?" he asked. She reached for his hand. "Now I believe we're going to live." He held her hand, warm and steady. "I missed 5 years," he said quietly. "I won't miss another day." Vivian leaned her head against his shoulder. For the first time, she wasn't waiting for something to go wrong. She wasn't planning an escape. She wasn't bracing for loss. She was allowing herself to stay. A week later, Liam brought home a drawing from school. 4 figures standing together. A mother, 2 boys, and a tall man in the middle. This time, the man wasn't a shadow. He had a face. And he was smiling. Vivian taped the picture to the wall and stood there looking at it. That was when she understood something simple and powerful. Love isn't about who has money. It isn't about who is strong. It isn't about who comes from wealth or who comes from struggle. Love is about who stays, who shows up, who fights beside you when life gets hard. Because sometimes the richest life isn't the one with the biggest home. Sometimes the richest life is the one where no one has to face the dark alone. And for the first time in her life, Vivian knew one thing for sure. Her children had a future. And this time, they had a family that wasn't going anywhere. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and stay with us for more stories of love, hope, and second chances. And tell me in the comments, what country or region are you watching from?